How's it going? And welcome to episode 4. Oh, 4. Wow, getting ahead of myself, Kevin. 242 of On the Wire. Proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. I am Adam Howe, joined as usual by Kevin Hasting, and we've got a great show as we hit part 2 of our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, usually 7-part series where we preview the categories that you will be drafting for your 2026 season. And we're gonna speed it up a little bit. Gotta get an easy pun in there at the very beginning. And we're gonna hit runs, stolen bases. Before we do that, Kevin, I feel like we missed a little bit of a week here or there. So happy to be back in front of you. How you doing?
Oh, great, Adam. Great to be back. Glad to see you as always. And yeah, pretty excited to talk some speed. I think more names than we were excited about for power. Obviously, the guys we're talking in the range, late in drafts or even left for FAAB in season. They're all going to have some warts, but I feel like there might be a few less warts with some of the speed guys that we can get late than the power guys we talked about last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty common mentality. Like there's more options late for speed, but does it help you as much as it hurts you, depending on how your draft went in the first 100, 150 picks or 150 ADP. And we're going to get into that a lot more. But in general, then we're going to jump right into it. We're skipping news a whole bunch in these last couple episodes because you know what? Somebody's got you covered there. And we want you to be able to come back to these episodes throughout the month of February and March as you're doing your drafts and you're considering all the options in a little bit more of an evergreen, at least for the 2 months of draft season. So Kevin,
yeah, and some of the moves we're seeing really don't affect what we're talking about much right now, right? When we're talking FAAB each and every week, every move means something to us. And so, we'll definitely get back to that when we're doing our in-season episodes. But like you said, I think other shows have everybody covered on the recent news.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, Kevin, general thoughts then on speed as a whole. And again, I feel like I preface this every single time we talk about this category. We are going to talk a lot about stolen bases, but there are 2 categories here, right?
Right.
We got to score some runs. Typically, they go hand in hand. The guys who are near the top of the lineup have more of an opportunity to score those runs. Those guys batting 3rd, 4th, 5th are knocking them in. But they're usually at the top of the lineup for multiple reasons. One, they're really good at getting on base. And if they're on base, they have more opportunities to steal bases. And typically they've got some legs underneath them that can get them to move along the bases in a stolen base manner. But overall, Kevin, top of your draft, what are you seeing or what are you thinking about, or how much are you weighing their ability to, score 80 plus runs versus all of your attention on power? How much of your attention is, hey, I need a well-rounded guy in the first 5 rounds because of all the warts that are happening later on? Or are you more thinking, hey, I can make up for this later on. I'm going for the best available player regardless of what categories they're putting in?
I think I'm going to bring up a question you typically ask me at some point in each of these episodes, and you'll typically allude to positions, right? Players by position. Am I worried about getting my power there? And typically my answer has been, for the most part, no, I don't care where I'm getting my stats from as long as I'm getting them. However, when it comes to stolen bases, not many catchers are going to go out there and get us our 13 to 14 stolen bases per spot in our lineup that we need. Not a lot of corner infielders even are going to get us a lot of those. So I do think that I do take it into consideration. I don't want to draft many middle infielders, many outfielders that don't contribute to the stolen base category. If I am, that I definitely want to have a plan of how I'm going to make that up. And so yeah, I do take position into consideration, and it does mean giving guys at those positions where we don't see a lot of guys stealing bases, maybe giving them a bit of a bump earlier in the draft, so that we're not looking for as many out of these guys that we're drafting later. And like you said, runs is a huge deal. I think it's easy category to overlook because you can still do well in runs if you're doing well in the rest of the categories. They all contribute to runs scored. Home runs, you get a run. Or if you're stealing bases, you're closer to scoring a run. So, but I think runs do get overlooked, and so we do have to be careful. Some of the so-called rabbits out there hit at the bottom of the lineup. And I think it was Chandler Simpson last season, 42 stolen bases, 51 runs, right? He only had 9 more runs scored than he had stolen bases. So we do want to be careful if that's someone that we're going to have in our lineup on a weekly basis. 51 runs is not nearly enough, and you won't make up for it. You can't have someone like that in your lineup on a weekly basis throughout the season, in my opinion. So that's kind of what we're looking at. I definitely want it, even in today's environment, right, where the stolen bases are easier to get. We need many more stolen bases than we did 3 or 4 seasons ago. I'm still happy with guys getting me that 5 to 10. It's not 0. It helps. Earlier in my draft, when I'm drafting my power and RBI and trying to pad my batting average, I really don't want the guys that are only projected for 1 or 2 stolen bases on the season if I have a choice in that spot. So kind of like power, but I think we do have more options later. And I do feel like it's something we can find in FAAB in season a little easier as well. So I'm pretty excited about some of the players we get to talk about this episode.
Yeah, I'm funny. We're doing a quick scan. I only can find, so I made a definition to myself of what a rabbit is, and tell me if you feel that this is off base. But I'm gonna make a definition of a rabbit is 25 or more stolen bases and less than 10 home runs. So you're basically being your minimal contribution in power, but you're making a difference, right, in stolen bases. That doesn't, there's no caveat about batting average or anything like that. But in the top 400 of ADP, there's only 5 guys that fit that category, right? You got Nico Hoerner, Chandler Simpson, you just mentioned, Xavier Edwards, Jose Caballero, and then Victor Scott, the second. And all of these guys are being drafted as starters between picks, 110 and 330. I mean, I guess that Victor Scott, probably a bench guy at a 330 ADP in a 12-teamer. But everybody else is starting, whether it's at middle infield, your fourth, fifth outfielder, or you're starting shortstop, or I guess second baseman for Nico Hoerner. So I guess, is there really a lot of opportunity to make up these, like, this stolen base deficit that you might find yourself in if you do find yourself drafting guys that are only going to get you 1 or 2 stolen bases regardless of position? I don't know that there's as much opportunity to dig yourself a hole with a rabbit, at least not one that you're going to stream in general. Am I missing somebody here, or is that like something that's put through your mind?
No, I agree with all that. And that's why, Nico Hoerner, one of the guys you brought up, is so intriguing to me because he can really help you in batting average, runs scored, and stolen bases. That's a huge help. But as we talked about last week, you definitely want to have a plan to make up for that power. And the problem is, right, when we're taking a guy like Nico Hoerner that we probably project for 4 to 6 home runs on the season, then even if you do draft an Aaron Judge or a Kyle Schwarber, you're basically giving up all of their extra home runs for one other spot, right? They don't get to spread out very well. That means you need multiple other players that are going to have better than the average that we need per lineup spot in home runs. So it makes it very intriguing, and it means a lot of guys we're going to talk about are projected with the playing time they're projected for 15 to 20 stolen bases, and the ones that the batting average looks at least digestible, I guess I would say, and
That's a good term.
And maybe be in the lineup enough to score some runs. And I'm really careful about what's the RBI projection for these guys. That it's not just home runs, right? And we got to be careful and not fall behind in RBI. But I feel like there's enough in that 15 to 20 stolen base projected range that I am comfortable concentrating more on power earlier in the draft.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I just as I look through my color coded projection sheet, it is funny to see how much ADP currently, and I changed my ADP on this episode to be the last 17 online championship drafts over the last 30 days.
Yeah, that's what I have.
And the correlation of home runs to ADP and stolen bases to ADP is night and day. It's like there's the stolen bases are so much spread out throughout the draft, whereas power is, my chart goes bright
green to red,
bright green to light. It's like the ombre, like it's just like a very gradual color change, whereas stolen bases is all over the place. It's like green, red, green, green, red, green, red. It's all over the place. So if you can focus on that multi-category thing at the you're gonna get the power. Like the power exists, right? Like you can dig yourself a hole by going, maybe even Jackson Churio or a Trey Turner type in the top 30 or in the top 3 rounds.
It's even my hesitation on Bobby Witt Jr. with the home run total we saw from him last year, right? I am not so. I took Juan Soto ahead of Bobby Witt Jr. in a draft.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I got distracted.
That threw you way up.
Yeah. Got distracted by this color scheme in general. But you brought up the idea of, knowing the positions where you're going to get these categories. And we talk about this all the time. And yes, I do usually bring it up. So I'm going to bring it up again in a little bit more poignant way. Naturally, I think historically we've considered, you're not going to get your stolen bases and even your runs scored from the corners. That's just not the type of player that is traditionally found at third base or at first base or even in the corner outfield positions a lot of the times. And so I wanted to see if that was true, at least according to the projections for this year. And it's pretty much spot on.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I looked through players in the top 300 of ADP and where you're going to get those stolen bases. And at the catcher position, there's 22 catchers or catcher eligible players that are being drafted in the top 300 ADP. And lo and behold, you got an average of about 3 stolen bases per player at that category. Not shocking to anybody. First base, 24 players, 4.3 stolen bases being projected. Third base, there's 23 players, 10. Okay, so there's a little bit more speed there. And I think that
Jose Ramirez is a big pad in there.
Yeah, there's a pad on Jose Ramirez and a couple, like 2 or 3 other guys, but ultimately Garcia being Michael Garcia being the other one that's kind of weighing that down or up. But the middle infielders, and it's like it's all there. Second base, there's 20 guys. Shortstop, there's 26 guys. So between those 46, it's about 16, 17 stolen bases per player on average. So it's like if that's where I'm going with this is not so much that, hey, you got to find the stolen bases in those corner infield. It's more if you're not getting that out of your middle infielder position, you're in trouble because you're not going to find it somewhere else.
Right. As much as I love Corey Seager and his price is great right now, he's coming off injury, batting average, power, but he's one of the very few guys that I put a 0 down for in stolen bases. If I get 1 or 2, I'd be surprised, and that makes it tough. You definitely have to have a plan if you're going to go that route.
Yeah. Outfield doesn't, there's not a whole, because you need 5 of them, right? So in the top 300, there's 65 outfielders being drafted, but they're averaging 14 stolen bases per person. So
Mhm.
it's not like you can make up for it by getting 2 or 3 guys, because all the guys that are padding up that number are being drafted in the first 3 rounds, right?
Mhm.
And so there's not a whole lot of stolen bases to go out, to get out there in the outfield position for your outfield 3, 4, and 5 positions. You're probably weighing that down with the your first 2. Um, so yeah, I mean, just that definitely something to consider. And as we move through the draft, uh, to nobody's shock, like it does go down, right? Like I talked about how home runs kind of follow a pattern throughout the draft, but there are pretty big cliffs in stolen base availability as you move down into your draft as well. Yes, there are those rabbits, but if you are trying to make up for lost ground by targeting those rabbits, you're not the only one. Even a 12 teamer, you're not the only one that's like, hey, I can grab Jose Caballero later on and he can play a bunch of positions for me, or he can be my bench streamer or whatever. Like I mentioned, there's only those 5 guys
Yeah,
that
these are
stand
the
out.
guys that you're thinking, I'm going to jump him about 3 rounds in ADP here, and then somebody else jumps him 4
Mhm.
because, like you're saying, there aren't very many of them, and all of us usually need one.
Yeah, exactly. So in the top 100, there's about 14 stolen bases per player per hitter. There's 59 players in my sample here. ADP of 100 to 200, it drops down to 11.2. From 200 to 300, it drops down to 7.8. And again, there's about the same amount of sample size. There's about anywhere
Mhm.
between 50 and 60 hitters being drafted in these groups of 100, right? 300 to 400 drops all the way down to 6.9. So like they dry up just like any stat you would expect to, right? Especially those that are being padded by other stats as well in those top 5 category. They're going rather quickly, but you're not going to have the ability to, again, unless you want to jump somebody up. And this is why ADP doesn't matter, right? This is
Yep.
why ADP shouldn't matter. It comes with the territory, sure, but you got to know when to jump as much as you can. But that's going to put you behind the 8 ball in we're only talking about 2 categories right now. You're not drafting just 2 categories, you're drafting usually 10, right? So there's
Mhm.
a whole lot of the whole half of the other side of the game that we're not even considering in this discussion. You move up Jose Caballero 4 rounds, what does that make as far as your availability for to fill out the bottom half of your rotation? Like what's your next bench piece that you need? And so there's a lot of things to consider as you do that. What situation makes you comfortable kind of doing that? Like how what do you have to do to feel comfortable jumping up? And I'm picking on Caballero here, but like even Victor Scott or Xavier Edwards, or any of these rabbits, like jumping them up. What other things have to be going wrong for you to feel comfortable jumping one of these guys 3 or 4 rounds in ADP?
Um, I have to have gotten myself in a pretty tough spot, and I really need them. And then I'm going to try to make that move when uh, one of them that has, first of all, uh, decent batting average is going to be the second thing I look at after what I'm trying to catch up on. And then I think I'm looking more at RBI than I am at home runs in power. They're obviously correlated, but it's the RBI that can sneak up on you, right? We're always paying attention to our home runs and our stolen bases. And that's why I think the RBI and runs get overlooked. These guys hopefully are getting us some runs, but like Chandler Simpson, it's one of the reasons that I can make a case for all of these guys, but Chandler Simpson is one that I probably make less of a case for, and it's just the run scored. Uh, Tampa Bay as a team, this is another thing I'm looking at, the team context, right? Tampa Bay by far stole more bases than any other team in baseball last season. They had 30 more stolen bases than Milwaukee, who was second. And that they were successful over 80% of the time, which leads us to believe they'll probably keep it up. But is Chandler Simpson going to score runs? They're number one in stolen bases. They're 15th in runs scored as a team. And if he's hitting at the bottom of the lineup for the team that's scoring the 15th most runs in baseball, that's not going to be a lot of runs scored. So that's where I'm, and last year's numbers show that. I would guess he would have more than the 9 or 10 more runs than stolen bases than last year. I expect it to improve, but the team context plays into that. So, and some of the teams that we traditionally have thought of as running teams, right? Kansas City, they were 17th in stolen bases in Major League Baseball last season. And as Vinny Pasquantino, Sal Perez getting older, but still with the power, and if Jack Caglione comes along like we hope, I don't know that they're going to push that number more than they did last season. So Cincinnati, they're barely in the middle third. They were 19th in baseball, and one player had well over a third of those. Now, I know there's many teams that we took on the stolen bases of one player away, they would drop way down this list. But Cincinnati, if you take away Ellie De La Cruz's stolen bases, they dropped to second to last in baseball in stolen bases. So I'm looking at team context through all of this as well, and managerial changes, that makes it tough. 2 seasons ago, Washington and Pittsburgh were running like crazy. Last season, Washington was 10th, still pretty good. Pittsburgh was 15th. So it's things like this that, especially as teams like Pittsburgh improving, are they changing their mindset as a team as far as stolen base attempts as well? So much goes into this. That's what makes it fun.
Exactly. All right. Well, there's a lot more to talk about, especially I think on the run side. But first, before we get into all that and more, we got to take a quick break. All right, Kevin, you touched on it just a little while ago when we're talking about scoring runs. Like we've got these guys that are on teams like Tampa Bay, like Milwaukee, that are going to steal bases. They're already fast. The Chandler Simpsons of the world, stuff like that. Jose Caballero for half of the year last year. Let's see how many times I can say Jose Caballero's name in this episode, by the way. But whether or not they're going to score runs, whether or not these speedsters are the second leadoff hitter, as you will, in the ninth hole, or are they near the top of the lineup, taking advantage across the board? Is there, and we'll get into some more specific players, but like, is there anybody out there that you really are eyeballing as somebody who is not necessarily stealing a whole bunch of bases, but they're going to be at the top of the lineup, which can then bring them into more opportunity? They're going to get on base. There's nobody in front of them. They could steal more bases than they have historically just because they're at the top. And because they're at the top, we're already expecting them to be closer to the 100 mark in runs scored rather than, the 75 or even 80 that speed alone might get them to.
Well, the first player to come to mind when you're asking that question that is being drafted late enough, he's not moving up in the lineup. He's actually moving down, but it's a really, really good lineup. And he doesn't steal a lot of bases, but he's going to score runs, and that's J.P. Crawford. I don't think he's been drafted in this range that we're looking at, the last 17 OCs. I don't think J.P. Crawford's been drafted. And he's projected for mid-70s runs scored and just a handful of stolen bases. But the run scored, even though he's projected to hit, 6th or 7th in that lineup, those can be very valuable. So J.P. Crawford comes to mind right away. As far as somebody at the top of a lineup, we had seen some projections for Mangum to be leading off in Pittsburgh. I don't know if that is still what we're thinking there. Let me pull up Roster Resources Pittsburgh page here really quick. because that was very intriguing to me. And they have him down at the bottom of the lineup now with some of the moves they've made. I could still see him at the top, possibly versus righties at times. Roster Resource has Spencer Horwitz at the top of the lineup now versus righties. But someone like Jake Mangum is someone to keep an eye on, because if he is indeed, as we get later into spring training and start seeing more of what we expect to be the regular season lineup, if we're seeing him up at the top, then definitely that gives him a boost over where he's being drafted right now for sure. Mm-hmm. And I already have him as one of the players we're going to talk about this episode, just based on what he's projected for. But if he moves up in the lineup, that definitely boosts the run scored category. And he's still probably we would still pencil in for close to, if not 20 stolen bases or more. So Jake Mangum is someone I would hope that we see that move from as we get on into spring training. But the one that come to mind when we're talking runs scored without the stolen bases that fits the area of drafts we're looking at, the first guy to pop in my mind, and it's been this way for a few seasons now, is JP Crawford.
Yeah, JP Crawford. And then the one that I'm eyeballing on one of his teammates is, the question I have for you is, does Josh Naylor steal 20 bases again? Like, is this something that we can actually, because goes back to the position thing, right? Josh Naylor, the only first base eligible player being projected for more than, on PLV projections at 19.3 stolen bases on the season, assuming health, assuming everything, right? And assuming he just keeps doing what he did last year with his 2% second projected sprint speed. He just has been having a lot of fun in Seattle, and that's great. And he's there for a couple more years now. You can't rely on that, can you? But you're not going to get it out of another first baseman. So it's like, is that even a consideration?
Yes, because as you said, it's a boost, and even if he doesn't get his 20, here the problem with Josh Naylor is I have no idea. Right? That's the number one problem. But Seattle was third in the league in stolen bases last season. If Josh Naylor's stealing 30,
how much of that was Josh Naylor, though?
Right. 30 of that was Josh Naylor. You take away Josh Naylor, and they're still right at the top 10.
Sure.
Even without him. Julio Rodriguez, of course, and some others. But and as a team, Josh Naylor, if I remember right, I think he got caught like twice, maybe 3 or 4 times. He was very efficient as well. As a team, Seattle, extremely efficient. They were 161 stolen bases in 198 attempts. So they're over 80% success rate as a team. That leads me to believe maybe we're overplaying this. Josh Naylor's not going to, I don't expect him to steal 30, but I was in the camp that many people are. I don't even buy this 20 projection. That last year was an outlier. He's not going to do that again. But as a team, Seattle was doing that, and Seattle was doing that when they were a good team competing, right? It wasn't like some of the teams that we see when teams aren't good. Sometimes they just turn guys loose, right? That's why I'm so surprised that the White Sox had so few stolen bases last season. I guess they never had anybody on base. That's probably the answer to that. But Seattle coming back, they're going to run their offense similarly to what they did last season, I would fully expect. So maybe I'm starting to think that I'm much more interested in Josh Naylor as my first baseman. I've been thinking about this over the last couple of days. It's great you brought him up, because the team context that I was talking about earlier, it leads me to believe that, I can't expect 30, but maybe we should be expecting that 20, which sounds crazy.
It's either that, like, is the question always is like, is this the new norm? or is this the the 96 Brady Anderson version of stolen bases for Josh Naylor? Do we
Right.
never see this again? He never comes close, and nobody would be surprised. Or is this just who he is, or how he's going to close out the rest of his career? I lean toward Brady Anderson comp on the stolen base side, just because it's also like, yeah, the rules have changed, and maybe Josh Naylor's just taking advantage of that. But at the same time, the league will adjust back, right?
Right.
Like they will adjust back. There's a lot more tape on Josh Naylor and how he steals bases, any kind of cues he gives. Teams are going to be looking for this next year. The pitchers, the catchers, the first baseman holding him back on the bag. I think that the league is going to adjust a little bit more for the Josh Naylor effect moving forward. So I will, I don't think you're going to stop him every single time, but I do think he's going to be held a lot more. And the thing is that his ADP is around 80, right? And at the first base position, we know that Josh Naylor has, the power, all the things you want out of your first baseman besides that. So at the ADP of 80, like any speed, any stolen base you can get out of that position is gravy. So it's like it makes that ADP more palatable, knowing that those stolen bases, anything on top of that is probably going to be there. So yeah.
This is what's crazy, Adam, because I agree with you. I think teams are going to pay not just Josh Naylor, but Seattle was successful on over 80% of their stolen bases. That will be a focal point for opponents to slow down their offenses, slow down that running game. But, I would think that teams would do that in season as well. And Josh Naylor stole 11 out of 13 bases in the first 87 games that he played last season. Then he stole 19 out of 19 in the final 59 games. He took off more and was more efficient once people knew that he was attempting to steal bases. He just kept going more and more. So yes, that is absolutely crazy to me. 30 stolen bases on 32 attempts and 19 out of 19 in the final 2 months of the season.
Crazy. To get back into the runs category here, just an interesting thing. We talk about position where you're going to get your stolen bases. Runs are, it's interesting because again, I'm harping on first base a little bit just because it's front and center in front of my face as I'm looking through my spreadsheet. There's more than a handful of first basemen are projected for 90 or more runs scored. Again, all my projections I'm using PLV projections as of right now. Can you tell me how many second basemen are projected to have more than 90 runs scored on the 2026 season?
Ooh. 6.
0. There's not one.
I figured it was
Marte, second base eligible at 89.1 runs scored projected. Gleyber Torres right behind him, and Bryce Terang right behind him. So it's like, yeah, these guys are fast. Chad Chisholm right behind him. So those top 4 guys, have some speed, right? More so, Terang and Chisholm, but they're not at the top of their lineup. Like Chisholm will probably be in the middle of the Yankees lineup. Bryce Terang should be near the top, sure, but he's spending, I don't know, more time stealing base. I'm not sure where that comes from, but if he's at the top of that lineup in Milwaukee, the offense didn't get better per se, but it didn't get worse either. So maybe I don't fully buy that projection, but Gleyber Torres was hitting at the top of that Detroit lineup for the majority of last season. And then Ketel Marte is probably all about health. No, I mean, he's projected for over 600 plate appearances with these projections as well. So my point is, though, like, how much are we banking on getting not both pieces of the pie when it comes to speed out of those middle infielders? And does the fact that there are these first basemen who are so good in batting in the 3-4 spot or 2-3 spot, getting you your power, making up for the lack of stolen bases in the runs category, how much does that weigh into your consideration at that position?
Yeah, it definitely does. And I guess this is why I have, for the most part, been waiting on second base. Justin Mason on Sleeper in the Bust has brought up several times this season that, yes, second base is horrible. There's only 2 or 3 guys at the top that are going to be drafted in the first handful of rounds. It really drops off. But then what it drops off to is fairly deep. So there's no reason to start reaching for the guy that you want out of the guys going later because they're all very similar. But yes, then the runs scored is what I'm looking at. I'm just looking at PLV projections as an example, and Luis Garcia Jr. sticks out for me right here in this way, right? A 275 batting average, 18 home runs, and 15 stolen bases. That's amazing, right? That for the 102nd ranked hitter by PLV, that's awesome. 3 category production, but only 62 runs is a big hit from a guy that you have to leave in your lineup day in and day out to get those 18 home runs, 15 stolen bases with that 275 batting average. So that does give him a hit, pretty big hit for me, because yeah, we need 1,100 runs scored. You're not going to get that getting, only 60 from somebody that's giving you really good production in other categories. But paying a little bit of attention to runs scored, not just home runs and stolen bases, really helps in a situation like that, because I think a lot of people, not a lot, but I think some people maybe drafting Luis Garcia Jr. and 18-15 with the 275 average where you can draft him is great. And they may not realize the hit they're taking a run scored.
Yeah. You might have said it earlier, and maybe I just blanked out for a second, but what have you figured out what you need in runs and stolen bases at each position?
It's 14 stolen bases. So that's something I was thinking about earlier when you brought this up, when we were talking about as opposed to power earlier, right? We can get 14 stolen bases from guys off the waiver wire. We can draft guys late that we can get 14 stolen bases from. I mentioned a lot of the guys we're going to talk about are projected for 15 to 20. In order to be able to do the same thing with power, we have to be able to get 30 home run hitters at that point in the draft. Mm-hmm. And we can't. We just can't. You cannot find a 30 run home, right? There may be 1 or 2 each season, but we're going to talk about several guys we expect to have 15 to 20 stolen bases or more. And that's just not possible with home runs.
No, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, just looking for both of these categories early on, and they just start dropping off quite a bit. You just got to be smart with what you can make up and what you can't later on in your drafts or on the wire. And there we go. We got the name of the show in there too. And so, all right, well, let's look at some of those guys we can get a little bit later on in our drafts. Kevin, we got by groupings of positions, if you will, as we typically do. We'll get some honorable mentions in there as well, but we're going to get to all that after this break. All right, let's move into some specific players. And again, we typically will say in this section, these are the guys that you can iron out the last portion of your draft, basically your bench, with an ADP of a 325 or later over the course of the last month. That's what we're using ADP on. Of course, we're using 12-team or online championship drafts in ADP on the NFBC platform. That ADP will change drastically depending on what platform you're on, but we're just using that as a standard. So guys that kind of stand out in that range, and these are guys that you might be able to get a little speed, you might be able to fill a gap. I don't expect to hold on to these guys all season long unless they just surprise you, right? but you can fill them in to start the season. Maybe it's a schedule thing. Maybe it's just where you feel like they're going to start the season on the roster. Or they're going to start the season off as a leadoff hitter. Great, they become more valuable at least at the beginning of your season and you're at the end of your drafts. Or maybe you just think they have some good matchups that they could take advantage of in the first couple of weeks. But I don't expect them to be on your roster all season long. So, corner infield, talked a lot about this already. Seems to be not seems it will be the most difficult place to find speed in general. So I venture to guess the names that we're going to talk about here are going to they're probably playing a different position on an everyday basis in real life.
Every single one of them.
But they're going to be eligible at first or third due to a technicality. Right.
One of them is going to play third base, but every one of these guys is also eligible at least at middle infield.
Yeah. So talk to me about some of the guys you got your eye on. Again, in a pinch, you probably don't want to be in a position to have to look at these guys, but a lot of us in a lot of our drafts will be at some point.
Yeah. The first guy I want to bring up is Jared Triolo in Pittsburgh. The one intriguing thing about me is PLV projections are right in line with just about everything, but they are the low projection in batting average for Jared Triolo. But they haven't projected in just 128 games, and he could play much more than that. He is the third baseman right now for Pittsburgh. Brian Hayes is gone. He's in Cincinnati now. Triolo played quite a bit of third base. He's actually eligible at first, second, third, and shortstop, every infield position. And PLV has him projected for 16 home runs, 60 runs scored. That is on the low side, but once again, they only have him projected for 128 games. That's where most projections have him in around that 130 game range. And I think he could exceed that. That would help the runs category. Zips has 581 plate appearances. So a few more than the others. And that gets him closer to 70 runs scored. So that helps as well. But I think Triolo in an improved Pittsburgh lineup, even though he will be close to, if not bottom third of that lineup, with his walk rate, gets on base enough. Unfortunately, we won't see that 298 batting average he had in 2023 as a rookie. I don't believe it was only 209 plate appearances, but he did improve from 2024 to 2025. Strikeout rate came down over 6 percentage points. That's huge. Now, projections give about half of that back, maybe a little less than half. So the batting average, but they still have batting average improvements, right? All of them, maintaining that 10% plus walk rate. So he's going to get on base. That and him being the everyday third baseman is going to keep him in this lineup, right? The on base percentage projections are perfectly fine, 330 or so, and PLV 16 stolen bases. He's projected, depending on the system, anywhere from 12 to 17. So we're getting into that 15 to 20 range with the guy. If he does hit 240 plus, like every other projection system does have him at, other than PLV, and they're close at 236. That still hurts our batting average a bit, but at this point, players available at this point, we're going to expect that. And yeah, 60 to 70 runs scored helps. There's not a lot of guys projected for 70 plus at this point in a draft, or that we can find on the waiver wire either. So I'd like Jared Triolo, and I think he can outperform these projections, mainly based on plate appearances and also the improved Pittsburgh lineup.
So you talk about projections, right? And so at this point in the game, you really have to be looking at projections based on what you think their playing time is going to be, right? Yeah. And so I'm gonna force you to ask this question because we didn't talk about news, but this is a piece of news that just came through that if he can find his way into more playing time with his team, which is not likely, but it's not as though he was bad last year. Same team, too. I'm talking about Paul Goldschmidt re-signing with the Yankees. Obviously, they've got the likes of like Ben Rice there, who's going to fill in at first base quite a bit and keep his catcher eligibility. Paul Goldschmidt, though, with his first base eligibility, talking about corner infield, has an ADP of over 500. So this signing is not going to skyrocket. We always talk about once somebody signs, their ADP starts going up. He's still going to be available in your 12-team drafts for whatever reason. You might be looking at him, but he's got PLV projected him before this signing because these haven't been updated yet. At how many plate appearances? At 527 plate appearances, if I average, and then a total of 66 runs, you bring that up to 600, which is the nice little round number that everybody likes to use for plate appearances. We're looking at 75 plus runs scored in that lineup, in the Yankees lineup. Now, how much do you weigh that when you're desperate at this point for runs scored? I'm not even talking about stolen bases anymore. I'm looking at runs scored. It's not necessarily easy to find somebody at the end of your draft who could score 75 plus more runs.
Absolutely, it's not. And I do not believe Paul Goldschmidt will even get close to that.
Sure.
But we're going to talk about him a lot this season. Now, the name recognition probably means he won't be available in FAAB in as many leagues as he should be.
Sure.
But I am looking at this, and unfortunately, since we're talking about a bit of news, this hurts Ben Rice. I think Ben Rice is going to sit versus some lefties, and that's why Paul Goldschmidt was re-signed, and he's going to be mostly short side platoon. Sure, when Giancarlo Stanton is injured, maybe Goldschmidt gets a little more playing time, maybe he gets in there at DH a time or two, but for the most part, going into the season with a healthy Yankees lineup, I think Paul Goldschmidt's short side of platoon, which will be amazing in the leagues he is available when they have a left-handed heavy rotation coming up on their schedule, will be all about Paul Goldschmidt, because if he's going to get the playing time for 3 or 4 games in our half-week scoring periods in NFBC, well, I do expect him to do that week what he would do in a 75-run season. Yes.
All right. Anybody else in the corner infield position that kind of catches your eye post 325?
Yeah. The other one, a couple that I want to bring up. One, new Boston Red Sox, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. He's always going to be intriguing in this spot. For me, it really depends on what Boston does, right? With some of the other additions they've made here this season. But I think it wasn't Sleeper in the Bust. I think it was Bubba in the Bloom. They were talking about, Nate Eaton got into 40 games for the Red Sox last season and stole 9 bags, right? Kiner-Falefa will get in more games than Nate Eaton did for the Red Sox, right? So there's double-digit stolen bases right there. I believe we could expect that 15 to 20 and great batting average, good lineup. So hopefully that does lead to runs scored, even if he is hitting at the bottom of the lineup. So I like IKF in this spot. Don't know that I'd draft him. You don't have to, and he's going to be available on waiver wires. He has been for us for years now. He's there when we need him on the waiver wire. The guy that I may draft, especially in a 15-team league, and I'm thinking more and more about this preparing for this episode. We talked about him last week because he can hit for a little bit of power as well. Zack McKinstry, if he's the starting shortstop for the Detroit Tigers, yes, Javi Baez is still there, but we talk about it all the time. That's not a position you want to move if guys in and out of most teams very often. And I don't think AJ Hinch would want to do it often. I'm sure Javier Baez may play some games at shortstop, but Zack McKinstry, maybe once we get past those 2 guys you mentioned earlier in the show, go the early in drafts, he may be the best third base stolen. He may be the third best stolen base third baseman out there after Jose Ramirez and Michael Garcia. If he's going to get 600 plus plate appearances, we saw more plate appearances than we'd seen from him in his career last season, and he didn't get to 600. We may see even more this year. Yes, he had huge home road splits. I've brought that up a couple of times. Typically, that's not something I pay too much attention to, but they were so drastic. Something weird was going on. But overall, yeah, Zack McKinstry, I think in a 15-team league, I could draft him as my corner infielder and expect him to be in my lineup right away to start the season.
See, the thing about this situation, I like Zack McKinstry. I like him more when he's at the top of the lineup, like he was for quite a bit about 2 years ago. He was just surprisingly always at the top of the lineup, especially against righties. And I wonder with what's happening in Detroit with money, all that, how much like Terry Skubal winning. But by the way, also big applause here. Terry Skubal winning his arbitration, getting that cash for his final year in Detroit. If it is even the full year, how much that might weigh into their decision to allow their, shortstop prospect McGonigal to come up and be that starting shortstop from the gate, right out of the gate, unless he completely blows up. He's in the Arizona Fall League. He's got the non-roster invite. He's not on the 40-man, but we've seen plenty of players bust through over the last couple of years in spring training and then jump into the 40-man and the starting roster. So I wonder how much that'll play a role. That might make me like McKinstry more just because he will be more available. He doesn't have that starting role. He'll do what he's done for the last couple of years. He'll just fill himself in wherever needed when there's an injury. McGonigal comes in, he's the starting shortstop, right? It's not like they're going to call him up just so he can get a little bit of a taste. He's either playing every day or he's, starting the season in AAA. McKinstry has versatility. They can throw him anywhere and he can fill in pretty much any position across the field, not just the diamond. So I like that situation in general. I've always been a McKinstry fan. We've talked about him plenty on this show. So I think depending on what happens there at the shortstop position, come April in Detroit, will determine how much we're going to end up talking about McKinstry on a regular basis on this show.
I think McGonigal starts the season at AAA because he hasn't even seen AAA. Fair. And then it's all about, can he maintain the low strikeout rates at AAA? And if he can, we'll see him a little sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. And then that could hurt the playing time for McKinstry. But I think that they are going to want to see quite a few plate appearances with him being able to maintain his low amazing strikeout rates, by the way. But I think they're going to want to see that level by level. I could be completely wrong, but that's kind of the feeling I get.
One other name that stood out to me, especially on the projected run scored, again, not sure how much I believe in this one, but I got to ask you about him because he's on your Royals, and with those walls moving around or moving in and moving down, Jonathan India projected for quite a bit as far as corner infielders go. Post 325, he does have three positions eligibility: second, third, and shortstop. Going into 2026, I don't see him gaining any new ones, but three positions is still nice to have. Will he be in this lineup every day to get to that 65, 70 runs scored, even if he's in the middle of that lineup, which is where Roster Resource has him projected at in the 6th spot right now?
Yes. And as bad of a season as Jonathan India had in 2025, he did score 63 runs in 136 games. And I think he plays at least 136 games. And we talked about him a little bit. I brought him up surprisingly, just mentioned him right at the end last week in power, because I do think he gets to double digits with those fences coming in. We have seen double digit stolen bases out of Jonathan India in 3 of his 4 seasons in Cincinnati. So I do think we could be looking at double-digit home runs, double-digit stolen bases, and I think we could hit that 70-plus runs scored, because I'm in the minority. I know I am, even amongst Royals fans, but I do think Jonathan India is going to play nearly every day.
I mean, if he plays every single day, I mean, he has the versatility. He's, he doesn't play all those positions equally well, but he can still do it. And in a pinch, that gives him more opportunity to at least play every day and get the 3 to 5 plate appearances on any given day. And we'll see what he can do with it, even if he's not the top of the lineup. All right. Well,
yeah, even the projections that have him for about 550 plate appearances have him approaching 70 runs scored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at a 600 plate appearance rate, PLV has him projected for 74. So we've got, they already have him at 560 plate appearances. So they're with you. You said 136. PLV's got him at 131 games played on the season. So there is some,
and what's keeping his price so low is one, he may not play much second base. But 2, the big reason is, and this I talked about this extensively with KC Bubba when I did the Royals preview on Bench with Bubba. That this, for those that are, I hate to say it this way, because if I'm wrong, then it hurts people's teams. But I am not drafting Carter Jensen in any redraft league. I don't think he's getting the at-bats. I think he's the backup catcher. And yes, a handful of DH appearances. But Jonathan India is playing ahead of Carter Jensen in 2026 for the Kansas City Royals. I firmly believe that. And if I'm wrong, those that do draft Carter Jensen are going to have better teams than I am. And I'll be dropping Jonathan India probably at some point. But I firmly believe that will be the case for the entire 2026 season.
All right. Well, you said Jonathan India being eligible at those positions. McKinstry, IKF, all these guys are eligible at different positions as well. So let's move into middle infield. We can't talk about those guys. We already talked about them, so they're off the table, Kevin. But in the middle infield, as we talked about extensively earlier on the show, there's a lot more speed to go around. And so some of these guys that we talk about may just be second base or shortstop eligible. There's less multi-position eligible players in general, as I don't have the stats to back that up, but it feels that way as you're scrolling through the list of players that are being drafted, especially within the top 300, 325. But later on in your drafts, you've got, some more flexibility. But who strikes your fancy when it comes to looking for more speed at the middle infield position at the end of your draft?
This might be my favorite late inning speed play, and that is because I think he may get more playing time than he's being projected for. And that is Nasim Nunez for the Washington Nationals. He is projected for roughly 300 plate appearances by most of the systems on Fangraphs, and projected for anywhere between 20 and 25 stolen bases in those plate appearances. PLV has him at 394 plate appearances. So they have him about 100 plate appearances more. And sure enough, 33 stolen bases, right, in just 96 games played. I think we may see him playing nearly every day all season long. Washington has got some guys coming, and they're going to want to see what everybody can do and let them all play. But I think that includes their 25-year-old middle infielder. I think they're going to let him roll. So the runs, right? This one looks absolutely horrible when we're looking at projections, 35 to 40 runs. Now we look at Zips that does their projections based on player comps. They take a lot of that. They give him 119 games played, and that jumps up to 54. So we get to 140, 150 games played. What I'm getting at is he will be on a 70 run plus pace for when he is playing. And if he is getting the playing time, this is somebody that I would draft even at the end of a 12-team league, just to see if he's going to get that playing time. If he's only if he's not playing every day and he's on that pace for only 300 plate appearances, drop him. Pick him back up when you need him. Nobody else is going to want him either with that playing time. Sure. Pick him up when you need him for a couple extra stolen bases. The batting average is a hit here, but what I like so much, we've talked about Jose Caballero. I'm bringing him up now, Adam. We talk about him every week. Somehow, some way, he comes up no matter what we're talking about. We both like him. Yes, he has a starting position to start the season, and then he can move around to play anywhere. But look at the per plate appearance projections for him and Nunez. They are identical. Runs scored, RBI, batting average. In fact, where there's a discrepancy, Nunez is actually it's not anything worth, it's not measurable basically. But Nunez is the one that gets a slight bump. And so if he's going to get the playing time that I think he's going to get, Nasim Nunez could actually be in my lineup much of the season. Now, I talk about power and RBI as well. His RBI is even worse than his runs scored, right? Yes, Jacob Young didn't get the playing time last season. I talked about Jacob Young all last offseason for stolen bases. His defense is going to keep him in the lineup. He qualifies for us to talk about in this category this week, but I didn't even put him on the list because I don't want somebody at the bottom of a lineup that this is bad, typically. However, we're not talking about 15 to 20 stolen bases. We're talking about 40 plus if he gets the playing time I expect him to get. So that does change things a little bit, especially when you can get him 200 picks later than you're drafting Jose Caballero.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the big one.
So it's a good name to watch, especially since he's easily the one with the most stolen bases in the least amount of playing time. These are guys we talk about all the time. It's like there's still value in these guys because you can stream them, whether they're a team streamer or if you're getting them off the wire and you're just playing those matchups. And even if you put them in your lineup and they don't start the game, he can still get you. And if he steals a base, he comes in as a pinch runner. That's all you want is a stolen base, and hopefully he knocks around and gets you that run scored. It doesn't even have to bring down your batting average because he's not actually, hitting or he's not getting up to the plate. I got to ask you about this one because it's the next name on the list as far as projected stolen bases by PLV post ADP of 325. Newly inked. And again, I'm also trying to squeeze in some news here as well. Newly inked with Atlanta is Jorge Mateo.
He's on my honorable mention list, so I didn't type him in, but he's on my honorable mention list.
But just because even PLV doesn't have him being projected for very many plate appearances, 238 plate appearances, still 30 or more stolen bases, because that's how he'll be used, right? That's how Atlanta will use him, even with Kim getting hurt. But they had already traded for Marcio Dubon, who should be their starting shortstop. Jorge Mateo, whether or not he plays shortstop or fills in at second base or DHs even, which he can do a little. I think he's done a little bit when he was with Baltimore as well. Just to get his legs in the lineup. Now he's crossed the 30 age mark. He's not getting any faster, if you will, but it's like a punter in football. It's like, you got one job. I want, just do the one job, and move it along. Do you kind of fit him into the same bucket as Nunez? Obviously he made your honorable mention. He didn't make your actual list here, but is a name we're going to have to just keep on our watch list based on what happens with Dubon, what happens with Albies in Atlanta, and like Jorge Mateo is the only other option they got unless somebody comes up, and they don't have anybody coming up in the middle infield positions in Atlanta that I can tell. And so
No, at one time we were excited. Well, excited might not be the right word. We were intrigued by Nacho Alvarez, right?
Sure.
And he's still there. But Nick Allen, glove only shortstop. Actually did get a handful of stolen bases from him early last year, but he stopped getting on base completely. So yeah, Mateo is intriguing here. I don't like him nearly as much as Nunez in that Mateo, actually, we should have brought this up. Rest in peace, Terrence Gore. But that is how Jorge Mateo is going to be used by Atlanta, in my opinion. He's a pinch runner late in ball games. He got his 15 stolen bases in 2025 for Baltimore in 83 plate appearances, right? But he got in 43 games. So that's how he'll be used. He'll be somebody we bring up, especially if he's getting a little bit of playing time. If we see that Atlanta is using him this way, we'll do that. We'll definitely talk about him. But it's going to be, for me, probably later in the season. It's going to be on the teams where I have a cushion in runs scored, RBI, and home runs. And the lack of plate appearances, therefore lack of at bats, helps us stomach the 220-ish batting average we expect. In fact, he only hit 177 in those 43 games for Baltimore last season.
But 43 games. So the 177 is not doing much.
Right. And at bats, 79 at bats. So that batting average isn't going to kill us. So we don't want him getting many more, but that does mean we need that cushion in runs, RBI, and home runs to be able to use him even on a limited basis, because we can't really take zeros in those categories.
I really like somebody like Jorge Mateo and Nasim Nunez in daily moves, head-to-head categories. Like, just pick them up on Saturday.
When you can throw these guys in a lineup the days you know they're playing, they're amazing.
Or you just pick them up on Saturday. And I just need 2 stolen bases to win this category.
And one guy could get them both for you.
Yeah, exactly. So those are the names. Keep going. You got a couple guys on here as far as middle infielders that you got your eye on to get some extra runs or stolen bases late in your draft.
Yeah, I like Chase Meidroth in Chicago. Now, I did mention Chicago did not run a lot last season. I was a little surprised about that. We do expect them to be a bit improved, but Meidroth, in spite of being, I think, a little underwhelming to what some of us expected when he was coming up through the minor leagues, but he really did hold his own. There's just no power there. So once again, the home run and RBI categories killed us with him. 5 home runs, 23 RBI in 122 games. You cannot put him in your lineup on a daily basis if that's what he is doing. Now he's projected for closer to 50 RBI in the same amount of games by projection systems. He's projected to hit 250-ish, even 260 by Steamer. He had 253 in his debut. He had 505 plate appearances in those 122 games last season and hit over 250. If he's going to lead off, the runs scored will be there in addition to the double-digit stolen bases. But I do have a difficulty putting him in my lineup and just leaving him there for extended periods of time with such low power numbers. But he's going to be a great asset on the teams that were covered in power, I think, because of the decent batting average to go along with the runs and stolen bases.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I like is a strong word, but what is happening on the south side of Chicago intrigues me more than it has in quite a few years.
Right.
And so you have to at least make note of of players that may actually make a difference in any category. on that team.
Right.
You can't just write them off completely.
They're going to surprise a lot of people. This is their 2026 projected WRC plus by lineup. And Chase Meidroth is the projected leadoff at an even 100. That's average. 103, 96, 105, 99, 120, 98, 99, 95. Everybody at least close to league average in that lineup. Now, there's only one player that's well above league average, and I don't buy it. That's Murakami. I don't think he's going to be 20% better than league average with the strikeout rate I expect out of him.
Sure.
But if you're hitting leadoff for a team that every player in the lineup is near league average, you're going to score some runs.
Mm-hmm. All right. You got one name. I feel like we just talked about him last week, and that and you got Anthony Volpe in both your speed and your power. Did we not talk about him in power?
I think we did. And also Andres Jimenez, both guys that I expect to outperform where they're being drafted, not necessarily outperform projections. Volpe, I may have to pull back. I was pretty excited last week about some of the reports of him working out and such. His timeline still hasn't changed, at least May. In fact, that's been reiterated by the Yankees this week. Because of all the workouts they're going to let him do, he's not going to be allowed to dive on that shoulder until sometime in April. So it will be at least May before he's back. So that makes me pull back slightly, but I still love the projections for the plate appearances that he's being projected for somebody you can get this late, and Andres Jimenez as well. Even this is a lineup I don't care that he's hitting ninth. In fact, it helps the runs scored on this lineup, Toronto's lineup hitting ninth. A nice lineup. Jimenez, I like him to bounce back to possibly that approaching 30 stolen bases that we've seen out of him for a couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's for that situation. Batting ninth, you think, oh, great, second leadoff hitter, but you get less opportunities because of obviously less plate appearances. But if your runs per plate appearance is high enough, it doesn't matter. So it's just a matter of let's get those guys to knock you in, and they obviously have the players to do that. He just needs to make himself available to score.
Just to reiterate what you brought up earlier in the show, every player we've talked about so far qualifies at middle infield, including the ones we talked about at corner infield.
Yes. All right. Well, let's get out of the infield and move into the outfield. Some of these guys, I'm sure, have some middle infield eligibility too, but not most of them. But before we do that, let's take one more last break. I mean, there's more outfielders, obviously, so your list is going to be longer anyway. But who's your favorite of this group who has outfield eligibility, can help you in the speed categories with or without the other three offensive categories that, we also need?
Yeah. This one's, well, I'm going to bring up a couple of guys right away. One of them doesn't quite qualify for our ADP. He's going slightly ahead of pick 325. But the reason I went ahead and included him is he's not drafted in every draft. 4 of the 17 online championships we're talking about that have completed over the past 4 weeks, Cedric Mullins has not been drafted. And I think he's strong side platoon, and we know he's going to run. So I like Cedric Mullins there. The other guy that just barely makes it, and you brought him up earlier, Victor Scott II. He's barely qualifies as far as ADP goes. So he is getting drafted quite often, but he not getting drafted in every single league and does make the cut here. And St. Louis, I think we're gonna see these young guys play in St. Louis. They're not a good team. I don't see them paying any veterans to bring them in. I think we're going to see guys like Victor Scott get their run this season, so they know going forward whether they want them to be a part of their plan or not. I was impressed a couple of years ago with Victor Scott in the Arizona Fall League. I thought, sure, this isn't a guy with a ton of power, but he he was hitting the ball with authority into the gaps. And I still think this is something that we might see improvements in getting on base for Victor Scott II, so we can score more runs, steal more bases. But kind of like I brought up with Nunez and Jacob Young last season, if he's going to be hitting at the bottom of St. Louis's lineup, which I'm not certain where we're going to see him in this lineup, that really hurts the RBI category. And yeah, Jason at Roster Resource does have him at the bottom of the lineup, so we do have to be really careful. I think even on the Cardinals, if he's going to get enough plate appearances, I think the runs will be there, even being at the bottom of the lineup. But the RBI is really going to hurt, even if he does approach double-digit home runs, like some of the projections have him getting to 8. But yeah, I do like him for the speed, and I think he can improve, but that'd be the play I'm making. He wouldn't be somebody I would carry on my roster. I might draft him late to see if he does have those improvements, but if he's just going to do what projections have him at, especially in the power categories, he probably doesn't stay on my roster, but he's going to be available on the waiver wire, at least in 12-team leagues, some of them.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. That's a good call out as far as like, just because he has an ADP of, around 300 or just a little over higher than 300 doesn't mean that's his true ADP if he's not being drafted in a handful of drafts. He's at 450
in 12, so he's actually not been drafted in 5 of the 17, even less than Robles.
So I want to throw out again. I'm trying to squeeze in a little bit of news that we haven't covered, only because his name comes up as not having, again, most of the players I'm bringing up are not being projected for very many plate appearances. But I want to get your take on Dylan Moore now that he has a new home. Like, we loved him when he's playing in Seattle, and every once in a while he'd get a bunch of plate appearances all in a row in the same week, or games played. Now that he has found his way to Philadelphia, what kind of role can we expect out of them to use him in, if any at all?
I think it depends on what they end up doing with Castellanos. So we've been waiting, right, this entire time, because I don't think he's going to bump either Edmundo Sosa or Otto Kemp from this roster, and he can't catch. So he has to bump Nick Castellanos off this roster as a specialist versus lefties, right? And so that's what I'm watching. If they do end up, that some people think they might just cut Castellanos. There's still maybe a trade out there for Castellanos if they eat all the money. If that happens, then yeah, I think Dylan Moore does make this roster. But as of now, I don't think he's going to make the opening day roster.
Yeah. I think he's lost the eligibility, but the name I was going to bring up in the last category or in the last position category, and get your take on it, is Josh Smith out of Texas. And the reason I'm thinking about him now is because Dylan Moore, and he has some history in Texas and what have you. But Josh Smith was somebody that I was just interested in because he found his way into the lineup. And when he was at the top of the lineup. Mostly it was because there was injuries or he was just forced to move into different positions. And if he is at the top of a lineup, even if he's filling in, he's scoring runs with that Texas offense, even with Semien gone. And actually with Semien gone does kind of free up the top third of the lineup a little bit in Texas. Overall thoughts on Josh Smith as somebody you would consider drafting. Now he's got like an ADP of like 500 or something like that. Like you can draft him pretty much anywhere. But like, does he have enough versatility and like eligibility and possibility of scoring runs? He steals his fair share of bases as well. And with the position eligibility, that can be something that can be useful.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think he'll be towards the bottom of the lineup, but Texas's lineup might be improved back to what we saw. You know, it's only been a little over 2 years since they were World Series champions. And this lineup's looking pretty good if they're healthy. Corey Seager, once again, bring up his name. But yeah, I love Josh Smith. And he appears to be the strong side platoon at second base, at least going into the season. If he starts to scratch out more games played than that, even, which is possible because he has played versus lefties some in the past. I don't expect, roster resource has Ezekiel Duran and as an infield and outfield versus lefties. He just hasn't done anything over the past couple of seasons, the opportunities he's gotten in Texas. I mean, it's been just completely empty plate appearances across the stat line. So he probably gets another chance in that role, but I don't know if his performance is going to keep him in that role. Then we see that means one more guy in this lineup, unless they bring in another, just right-handed hitter, that's another guy that can't be platooned. And so, yeah, I think Josh Smith is, I could go into a season in a 15-team league with him as my corner infielder. Absolutely.
Sure. Ezekiel Duran not doing anything despite every one of us trying to will it into existence every spring.
I think part of my problem is I was at the game when he got called up and hit a home run, and it was a very pivotal point in the game. They needed that home run.
Yeah.
And so I've
That's
just
your only
loved
impression.
him ever since then, and he hasn't done anything. He was good for about 2 weeks.
Yeah, we're not the only ones willing that into existence, and it just hasn't flourished. It hasn't created itself. All right, keep going though. In the outfield positions, then post 325. Any other names out there that you're just gotta at least keep an eye on? Make sure they're on your watch list. Make sure they're on your rankings list. That if you find yourself in a hole in the speed categories, you might be considering.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about Victor Robles. Unfortunately, if JP Crawford isn't hitting at the top of the lineup, neither is Victor Robles, and he's actually going to be below JP Crawford down at the bottom of Seattle's lineup. But good lineup, and I think Victor Robles is the right fielder. Missed a lot of time last season. When he did play, it wasn't what we saw in 2024. I think he can give us what he gave us in 2024. From the bottom of the lineup, though, so that affects things. He did hit near the top part of that 2024 season. Love Victor Robles there. In Houston, a couple of guys. One of them I expect to get more playing time. That's Jake Myers. I think his defense keeps him on the field a lot of days. That the outfield in Houston is kind of a mess. We're going to see Zach Cole at least on the large side of a platoon as well, I think. And both of these guys projected for 15 to 20 stolen bases in that role. Houston as a pretty nice schedule to begin the season, I've noticed, as I'm starting to look at schedules. Obviously, I'm not putting specific pitchers in, but kind of just looking at ballparks. Houston has some home games. I think they go to Colorado. The ball's not going to be flying out of Colorado that early in the season, but we're talking about guys we want getting on base and stealing bases and scoring runs, and Colorado is a BABIP haven. So I love the early season schedule for Houston. I think they might go to West Sac too, but that probably needs to warm up before we get the benefits out there as well. But just a really nice early season schedule for Houston. Jake Myers, I think, will be in the lineup most days, and Zach Cole, large side of platoon. Mentioned Jake Mangum earlier. Isaac Collins, I think, is close to an everyday left fielder for Kansas City. If he does anything close to what he did in the time he played with Milwaukee last season, he could score some runs and steal bases and do it with a nice batting average. And then I don't know how long, but I don't think there's any way that going into the season, Jake McCarthy isn't getting everyday playing time in Colorado. That's just what we Colorado over the years, they really upset us. They bring in some of these veterans. They get all the playing time. When we want to see younger guys, that's going to continue at least to start the season. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have Jake McCarthy in our lineups early. And then if he does start to lose playing time as the season goes on, we can let him go because he's not costing us anything right now.
I'm going to give a shout out here. Again, I'm just trying to squeeze in some news.
Yeah.
Harrison Bader in San Francisco. I mean, I think these are the things that I think people would be worried about. One, San Francisco, pitcher friendly park. You're going to lose some of that power. We're not talking about power. So I don't really care about that, right? Or any power he might have brought to the table comes down. Two, San Francisco has made a name for themselves to having a lot of platoons. I don't see a lot of opportunity to platoon at center field, which is where Bader is projected to be for the Giants in the season this season. So I'm not as worried about that. That being said, I don't see a lot of opportunity for him to be at the top of the lineup either, which he has filled in for in previous seasons, with Luis Arias also being signed in San Francisco to play second base. By the way, again, there's some news in there. Harrison Bader, though, in San Francisco can still get you even in the middle of a lineup, 5th, 6th, 7th, and roster resource has him in the 7th spot, which is very likely where he ends up being for most of the season, unless there's some kind of injury and he can weasel his way up to the top of the lineup. Overall thoughts on Harrison Bader in San Francisco in both in those two speed categories that we're talking about?
Yeah. And he's going ahead of pick 300 in most drafts over the last few days.
Sure.
Yeah. So yeah. This is one on where our going back 4 weeks is actually hurting, but you're absolutely right to bring him up. But he's going close to pick 200 in a couple of drafts over the past week. My guess is when we look at this chart, right on NFBC, and you pull up the player name and we get the graph of their ADP, and he was going right around what his average is right now, right? Pick 330 all the way up till this signing. It bumped up just a little bit, and I think those are probably the draft and holds. I think he probably jumped up in a couple of FAAB leagues. A couple of the OCs are probably these couple of picks where he was taken earlier. I don't know that that's the case, but I kind of expect it is. Because if he's not getting the everyday playing time, he's not the everyday center fielder. But I agree with you. It looks like if he is, as long as he's healthy, they can drop him. So I could see him being drafted earlier in the FAAB leagues. But 100%, when Harrison Bader is healthy, he's going to be projected to be a 15-15 guy. If he could actually stay healthy and be projected for over 600 plate appearances, he'd be projected to be a 20-20 guy. The batting average all over the place, right? Because it has been throughout his career. So it is in projections as well, everywhere from the 230s to the 250s. So I just pencil him in at 240 and hope it's a little better. But yeah, absolutely Harrison Bader. But you do have to take him earlier than what his ADP is now. Even earlier than what is still showing. What is showing is min for completed drafts in the OCs 279.
Yeah.
I would expect that becomes his average.
His new home.
At a minimum, that's his average, and he may even be a little ahead of that.
Yeah. Just even with a decent lineup around him, just in that ballpark where you're going to be in the 6th or 7th spot in that lineup, those run scores still going to be tougher to get with the added player appearances, obviously also with Bader's injury history. I think that those expectations PLV has him for plate appearances just over 500 plate appearances right on the season. And that's through 125 games. So I don't know that he plays 125 games. That's where you have to really ask yourself, how much do you believe in that? But he's healthy now and he's starting the season. That's where these draft picks are in general. Maybe not him, because if he's going to be sub 300, maybe that does bump him into your OF4-5 spot, or even your UT spot if you've already filled out your outfield. But if he is playing, that it's nice to see the 15-15, right? With 60 runs scored. I'll probably take that.
Another one that you've brought up nearly all of my honorable mentions that I had, but one that you haven't is with his new home, bringing up news again, Luis Angel Acuna. Probably not in the starting lineup to start the season. At least it does not appear that way. But at least short side platoon plate appearances. And this is one of those guys that I think that's good for us. We don't want him in our lineup with the lack of power, the lack of home runs, the lack of RBIs. We don't want him consistently in our lineup. But in draft and holds where we roster him, get him in our lineup when they have a lot of lefties coming up in FAAB, I think he'll be someone that, unless he is getting much more playing time, will be available to us, and one of the players we'll be talking about in this category throughout the season. And so Luis Angel Acuna is someone else to keep an eye on. I don't think he's going to have the playing time to draft him, but definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Cool. Well, we got to squeeze in for those who are doing they're waiting way too long on catcher for the 2-catcher league. If for whatever reason you are trying to make up ground in stolen bases, or more poignantly in runs scored, does Bo Naylor actually find his way into enough plate appearances to actually take advantage of a lot of the things we've seen or thought we would see out of Bo Naylor, especially in the speed categories? Projected, at least PLV has got him for 485 plate appearances through 118 games, with 54 runs scored and just 3 stolen bases. I'm writing off the stolen bases. The only person that PLV has projected for more than 3 stolen bases after ADP of 325 is Harry Ford with 6. And that could happen. Bo Naylor, though, specifically calling out, seems to be the one that has kind of the most opportunity to tap into what we might have seen or thought we were seeing as he was moving up in the system.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, we've seen 5-6 stolen bases out of him in less than half of a season in the past. And I think we probably are going to see about 120 games, getting us to that mid 400s plate appearances, not quite getting to the 500. But in certain leagues, this is something that varies from league to league. I am typically at least one fairly early catcher in 2-catcher leagues,
exactly, yeah.
Drafter. We've talked about that a lot. Lots of times too. I want to get 1,000, even 1,100 plate appearances out of my 2 catchers. Bo Naylor could help with that if you go really early, right? If we're expecting 450-ish, maybe a little more than that. A couple of the top, William Contreras, Cal Raleigh, we're going to expect well over 600 plate appearances out of those guys. So I'm coming around to, in some leagues, everybody wants 1 or 2 of the top catchers. I still want 1, but if everybody's trying to get 1 or 2, I'm not going to spend money on my second one or spend a high enough pick to get my second one. And Bo Naylor is somebody that I have jotted down to maybe bump up a bit if I'm needing a second catcher late, especially if there's somebody that doesn't have any catchers yet, right? It's something to keep an eye on. Who's filling that catcher position? Who has Ivan Herrera, who doesn't qualify at catcher to start the season, who has them on their roster and needs another catcher, right? So you really got to keep an eye on it. But Bo Naylor is somebody I'm willing to go into the season as my catcher too, especially in a 15-teamer.
Yeah, and he across the board projected 5 categories is 4 categories. He's not going to do, he probably won't bat enough to hurt your batting average, but that's not going to help you either. Anybody else worth kind of throwing out there lightning round that you're just again keeping an eye on, or I think we might have hit the entire well here, Kevin?
Yeah, I think I think we caught just about everybody. One guy that just missed the cut. I think he's being drafted a little before 300, but not much earlier than that, is Evan Carter in Texas. And we talked a little bit about the Rangers lineup.
Nolan
And
Shinwell in Anaheim
he
is
can
at the top of my list when it comes to runs scored, but first base, you're not making up in your stolen bases with him per se. But at least runs scored, 70 some odd. He's going to probably play every day unless he gets injured again. So that's another one. Just checking him off the list.
Yeah, and short side platoon, Minnesota's lineup wasn't great last season. Post type sleeper, he's really going to hurt your power, but a guy that's going to be available, and we'll talk about in season, I'm sure, when there's a bunch of lefties coming up for Minnesota to face, is Austin Martin.
All right. Well, I think that'll do it then. We'll get into who's going to make up for this batting average drain that you might have gotten by picking up some of these players in their next episode as we talk about opportunity. Of course, we'll talk plate appearances or at-bats and batting average there. But as we close up speed, Kevin, is there any other last second piece of advice as drafts are starting to really, really ramp up? Obviously, once you hit February and going into March, TGFBI was just, put together, waiting for those drafts to start up. PitchCon is closed up. We got Potapalooza coming up toward the end of the month as well. So,
no, unfortunately, it's not happening this year.
I missed it.
Yeah. Just saw that announcement yesterday or today.
All right. Well, sorry. For anybody.
No, it's all good.
But Kevin, anything else then you can add on to that?
No, I think just reiterating that what we talked about early, and then you kind of just summed it up a couple of minutes ago. I am more comfortable having to catch up on speed late in a draft than I am on power. And it's because there are enough of these guys. Yes, I do like a couple of them that are going to have some playing time, and in some cases not have the playing time, which actually helps. I do like a couple of the guys that are a batting average drain, but in general, there's enough of these guys available. We just talked about probably 20 players, at least mentioning some as honorable mention. And so when I am stuck and need one of these guys, I'm really looking at batting average and then RBI to separate the ones I want from the ones that are available.
You got to know what you're looking for throughout the course of your draft and what you're willing to, spend a little bit more time on later on. So I think that's great advice there. But that is going to wrap it up for episode 242 of On the Wire. After all that, I am Adam Howe. On behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.